if you were to ask me the most important thing I could tell you to do disaster commercial restoration after coaching hundreds of clients and students through this, I would tell you it's having a plan before the call comes in.
This is Jeremy Newman. Thanks for wasting an hour with me listening to the Disaster Podcaster.
Hey, welcome back to Disaster Podcaster, episode 3 of our 4th season. This year we're talking about just projects. And when I talk about projects, I mean jobs that we've done in the commercial space, not necessarily all large, but more about the details of jobs, the schematics, behind the scenes, the people, the situations, the crazy customers, the crazy people we worked with, the incidents that were funny or embarrassing. So just trying to bring a little bit of a, what I like to call tailgate conversation, war stories from some of the years of traveling the country and the world doing disasters. I find that the stories that come from them are much more relatable than the projects themselves. I can't tell you the details on every single job, but I can usually tell you who I was working with and kind of the situation around it. You know, when we sit and try to plan out our podcast, especially in this format where we're looking for particular projects, you're inclined to kind of go linear timeline chronologically through, you know, starting from the earliest of your career on. I'm just going to be jumping around because I don't think that things go in that way. Episode 1, we talked about Joplin, Missouri, probably one of the worst events that I've been a part of in its own way. So make sure you check that one out, how devastating a tornado can be and what recovery in that situation might look like. And if you ever are called to help in a tornado, it might be some relatable stories. The second podcast this year was about the trench coat man in Memphis. I told a story about a job we were doing that just kind of fell into our lap. All your marketing, all your sales efforts and relationships, sometimes being in the right place at the right time is important. I would say a takeaway from that episode, that podcast, episode number 2, was being in the right place. But you need to get started. The project we were working on before we got the $1 million job was generally smaller. So in your market, you don't need just whales and whoppers, Jumanjis. You need, you could get the CVS pharmacy, the local assisted living, the local grocery store has a small damage. Just start marketing and start building towards doing those. This is what I'm going to be doing with CATx, which I'm going to put a link down below. You can get on the waiting list of our coaching that's going to be probably late summer or in the fall to start doing CATx, commercial and large loss business coaching, how to add that to your business. I say just get started in your local market. You probably already know the people, the business leaders, the other, people at the chamber, you're in BNI. They need to know that commercial is something that you are capable of handling. Once your truck is seen, your trucks are seen outside of a commercial place, the market, your local community might start seeing you as, oh, I didn't know they did bigger stuff, library, a hospital, a hotel. Those are ways in. So wherever you are might lead to the next place where you want to go. So as I diddle around, I don't normally script these. This is all just casual, conversational. I don't know if you're, whether you're driving to a job in your truck or your car, sitting in your office, maybe you're sitting on the back porch, wherever you're listening to this, I do want to thank you for tuning in. I've gotten some good feedback, which has created more talking points for me to have, that what people are wanting to hear. So if you have things you want to listen to more of and more details, and I'm skimming over or glossing over something, make sure you let that know. But I was sitting trying to think about which big projects to get to. I'm waiting till later in the season to get to some of the Katrina, the bigger ones, the BP oil spill. And I started looking at some of my international jobs. I've worked 11 other countries, and I don't know that I really am going to go deep into each one of them, and I'm going to kind of stay domestic with that. But I'd like to discuss this topic today for our central idea, and that is international. That is working abroad. I don't know if you are in a place in your business where that's an opportunity. It might not be. I worked for national companies international companies that had the footprint that could manage those. I would say if you normally only work in your backyard, getting called, you probably won't get the call, but if you were asked to go to France and do a project, you probably don't know what you're up against. And I just want to kind of bring that up today about some of the things that you have to have in place. I would say one of the best projects I worked on internationally, and it's hard to say, but I enjoyed the experience. It was hard. I went to April. So in March of 2011, there was an earthquake and then a subsequent tsunami that crashed into northern Japan on the island of Fukashima. You've heard about it. You've heard about the Daiichi nuclear plant that had the meltdown there. Still an incredible cleanup effort going on at that plant. But what people don't realize is that's an entire area and community that was both small residential as well as some light industrial. We got a call in 2011. So interesting enough, that was a break for me. I got to go to Japan to get out of a very, very stressful project of working in the Gulf area of the BP oil spill. That happened we got called into that probably in mid-May of 2010. So that was going on. They shut off the oil flow in September, and that job completely changed. We're going to get to that in another episode in the future. We're going to talk about it. It's probably going to be 2 episodes because the complexity of the BP oil spill was pretty intense, but incredibly interesting. Opportunity of a lifetime. Loved it. But in April, March is when the tsunami happened, and we started hearing and getting calls that we were being asked to see what we could provide for help. Japan did not have. It's a very, very incredible country, but they did not have the infrastructure to help with that much disaster. You've seen it. If you've seen an area-wide disaster here, it's all hands on deck. They don't have the saturation, the number of companies there. Belfour operates in Japan to some degree, but we were contacted. The municipality and some of the business leadership groups over there that owned the businesses. And there were a couple that had American investors and interests. So there was some real Americanized businesses, industrial and even facilities, medical facilities that got affected by the tsunami and the earthquake and the subsequent things like that. Now, there is an area, we found out when we got there, when we arrived in land. Let me back up. Sorry. The opening scene said, you've got to know how to operate jobs before the jobs come in. Our industry is market, get the call and then figure it out. On commercial, and especially the larger they are, and depending on who the client is, you don't have that opportunity to start failing from the beginning. You have to have the resources. You have to know how to call the right people and make things start happening. To get a group of people to go to another country, you obviously need to have vetted people that are ready to do that. It sounds exciting to call up some supervisors and project managers and say, hey, do you want to go to Japan? Do you want to go to Oman? Do you want to go to France or Australia? They're going to say, yeah, it'd be a lifetime. But are you ready to go from anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks and what it looks like and feels like to work in another country? And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. So I started getting the calls when I was in the oil spill. I was a commander. We call it the CAT commander of the oil spill. And we were in good shape. We'd already been there that was right at a year that we'd been there. It ended up being about 18 months long. And they said, Clark, we have a very complicated project or a set of projects that we're being asked to help on in Fukushima. I'm sure you've watched the news, and I'd seen the news, and never in a million years that I think they needed our help, but they did. And they said, can you get away from Deepwater Horizon is what it was called. The oil spill was called Deepwater Horizon. That was the rig. And he said, can you get away for, let's say, 4 weeks? I'd been home recently for an extended stay. I had not been living in the Gulf anymore. I'd gone home for a while. I had project managers in place. I had leadership. I had structure. It didn't require me to be there full time. We even hired some local project managers that lived in each of these zones. So these weren't people away from their family. And that's just what you have to think about in longevity. But we felt like we were in a good place for me to be abroad. I'd already worked in other countries several times. I needed a crew, a team. So we had to look at who has a passport, a current, not expired passport, who hasn't gotten in trouble, because you can't go over and work on a work visa overseas if you've got felonies or something like that. And we didn't employ that, but we had to make sure that someone in between when we hired them and did periodical checks, that someone didn't get in trouble. So had to put together, assemble the team, and that meant it was a lot of things. I was part of that team to find the 4 other PMs that we needed, and they had to come off of other jobs that they were working on. The company I worked for at the time, we worked on bigger projects, and they were sometimes month or 2 months or 3 month long jobs. When we start taking the head project managers away from projects that are active and running, it's a lot of disruption there. So we had to really plan that and look at who we could pull in that didn't have a passport, or who needed, or who can handle the opportunity and needed to get out and get some work done, or who had people underneath them that could probably step up and run those jobs. And that meant more resources were sent there to replace that project manager. So we assembled a team, and we're getting, again, the hardest part when you're heading to a project in the early stages is not having a lot of information. You're getting some, a lot of it's speculation, and there was some translation. There was some reports and requests we were getting, although we had American agents that were putting that together. Our management company was helping the Japanese government and their infrastructure, their interior department. They hired an American, a U.S. and English-speaking group to help source the help they needed. So that's how we came up. They looked us up. They checked us out. They did some research. We had a great safety record. We had a good track record. And so we were getting unsure information. For a moment, I'd worked in some hazardous material situations, but I did not quite feel like we were competent to operate in a nuclear meltdown situations, which is what they had with the Diachi plant. Eventually they, and even today, I think in 2011, that was 13 years ago, there's still some of the localized areas are not inhabitable. And there are people working on that project every single day to get rid of the radiation affected materials. But we didn't think so. But we quickly found out that they've got that handled. They've got scientists. They've got the right crews that work there. We weren't going to be helping on that. It would have been cool, but it really wasn't something we were going to do. We started hearing about there was a local hospital, small-ish. Fukushima was not a big part like Tokyo. This is an island nation, an island off of it, and we're going to fly into Osaka, I think it was, and go in Naraha. And I always say Naraha, Naraha. I say it like it's Spanish. There's no J in it. It's Naraha. It was a village or town just south of Fukushima, outside of the blast zone. In the blast zone. So we had to prepare and be orientated with what the exposures were going to be. We were going to have special gear. They were going to provide that for us. So we're looking at what do we need to bring from us? What drying equipment do they have? How do they source equipment? Everything over there is not cubic and square foot. It's metric. So it's liters. So we had to do the translations for the drying from the floods, which was interesting. We had to start finding our brokers for staffing and materials and how we're going to source those. It was a lot. It was a lot of, and luckily we had a great logistics manager that had experience working abroad. He started burning up the phone calls, and he started recruiting some people to help him do that. And we flew over, and man, I'll tell you what, talk about feeling out of your element. Arriving in Japan, number one, I'm 6'4". Everyone there is 5'5". I'd been to Japan once before in the early 90s, but not from the disaster industry, from a different reason. And it was always an experience. But going there, but we were met with such gratitude from our host, our agencies that were helping us and hiring us and things like that. And they were picking up our discomfort and reluctance. But they really, really, really just helped us realize that what we have is a wet building, disaster-torn area, debris. It's no different than a job in California or Texas or Florida. We're doing the same thing. We just have different languages. We have different. So it's the same materials. It's acoustic ceiling tiles and concrete, and drywall, and things like that. So we settled in. We ended up doing 2 or 3 little projects there for a while. I had my project managers all running around. It was a lot for a few people. Working abroad, you really, it's not for everyone. I think that might be a current theme in this. I think I've said that in each podcast this year. This is not for everyone. Being that far away with the time difference from home, trying to call and FaceTime with, didn't even have FaceTime then. Talk to the kids. I think we had Skype. Talk to the kids, talk to the wife. Hours were different. Stay up really late to make those calls, and then you're tired. Just not reading the language, having to have translators. Everything moved much slower because of our abilities. These were all interesting components that when you compound to again, we could do the job, but it's all these other things, and ordering supplies and how long it took for things to get there, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that I've worked in a lot of countries, and this has always been the case, but I always seem to forget. I am a picky eater. I'm a traditional. I like to know what I'm eating. I like Americanized food. I like seafood, but I'm not big on eating live octopus and live fish that's looking at me and flopping around and things like that. And so they have a very interesting palate in Japan, especially the further out from the big cities you get. It was interesting. I ate a lot of peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter, they didn't have jelly. I lived on peanut butter and crackers for a few weeks. I ate some things, obviously I eat Chinese and Japanese food, but this was different. This was not what we have in America. But we ran these projects and we met some incredible people, and they were as grateful and as excited for us to be there as we were to be there. So that was the Japanese experience. I would say worked in Australia one time. Fun, difficult. It was inland in the outback. There was some flooding, getting equipment there. Things in Australia move at a different place. But again, it's I'm not even going to give you specific names, but you have a staff. It's almost like it's military. It's your brothers and sisters, but they go to different places. There's so much unknown. The anxiety, the silent anxiety from doing those jobs creeps in. These guys are professionals and gals. They're professionals at this, but they're still human. And some people get in trouble because they get risky. They start, really stressing out, and they're letting loose a little bit too much. They're treating their anxiety with alcohol or worse. And it just really affects everything. It affects them, but it also affects the project and then our company brand to be there. So Australia was really cool. We had some places we would go where security was a big issue. Oman was one of those. Being a white, assumed to be Christian person in a largely Muslim country has its challenges. We debriefed our team on that a lot. We had a guide that helped us with some of the cultural adaptations of that. But what you have also you still have insurance companies that kind of all work the same, but different billing expectations, different billing styles. And a lot of that was handled by the corporate office. When we were working overseas, we would still gather our daily data, time, materials, people, equipment, and submit that. And we weren't putting together the bill. Like if we were in America, in Omaha or Colorado or something, and we were running a big project, it's likely that either a director or some admin staff working for the director is on site or assigned to you to be billing that job and gathering the data and making sure everything's working out. And you're kind of more involved in that process. But when you're in a overseas situation where you've got a lot more on your plate and a lot more challenges to overcome, that is kind of taken off. You still need to be involved, but there's different currencies. So understanding the currency rate is always important. If anybody's traveled internationally, you've got to know what the exchange rate is and how to get that money. And then we're issuing per diem to people. So we've got to make sure that we're issuing per diem in the currency that they can use there, whether it be the yen, the Australian dollar, the franc, wherever we are. But it's a lot. Now, that said, 80 to 85% of your team falls right into it. It just becomes another day at the office after a week or two. It's really funny to watch where people pick up the language. Someone from South Florida or somebody from New York is all of a sudden speaking Japanese or some dialect of Indian or Pakistani or something. That it just sounds funny coming out of a Texas guy's mouth talking French. He just really does. But we have this innate ability to morph in this industry and even as humans. We have a real adaptability as human animals to do that. So working overseas was always tough. Again, it's a lot of planning. You don't have a Home Depot just to go to. You don't have a John Donna Ramsco or CATx on every corner or even a phone call away or an email away. There's a lot of planning that goes into it about what you're doing. And then there is some sitting around and waiting. And waiting is not something we're good at, but the customer is aware. But the better we get at having the right resources that can respond, and then the systems and processes that do that, that help us speed that up are wildly popular, which is why you end up getting called back to help in these situations. You're a viable option in Germany to come do that. I did a fire at a Volkswagen plant in Germany one time. Most people in Germany, a lot of people, speak English, so that was fine. I don't speak German, or very little. I picked up a lot, though. It's funny how you pick up foreign language. I was just talking about that, and it stays with you, but only if you use it often. But in Germany, there were a lot of equipment, a lot of Volkswagen manufacturing equipment that had to be we had to clean it from the fire and soot. The char and ash was really, really disruptive. What burned was extremely caustic, but they had to also have their engineers making sure that this was still serviceable and their warranty, that this was operating well, and it would operate in a year from now real well. But that was a good one. Good food, good times. Still friends with a good number of people that I worked with on some of these international countries. They weren't all great. I don't particularly love working in Central America. South America, pretty bad too. I mean, there was some crime. We were in Cali, Colombia, for an earthquake and a flood. That was interesting because it's a weird socioeconomic relationship down there with there's no middle class. There's poor and there's rich. And then when you're an American, white or African American or whatever it is, a Hispanic, even from a different, if you're in Colombia but you're from Mexico, probably not a good idea to send them down there. That's something we learned early in our careers, was understand where you're working and who will be working together, because they don't all like to work together. That's true in South Florida with Cubans and Haitians don't like to work together. So if you have supplemental staff and teams, mixing those up is adding a complication, and you're probably going to be chasing it around a lot. But that happens in foreign countries. Cali, Colombia was interesting, but things move so slow, and everybody has, and this is true in the islands too, the political situation, the corruption. I will say it loud. Everyone has their hand out. Everything costs more just because of someone else's hands are going to touch it. You've got to build that in to your pricing. You've got to predict for it. You've got to know who to be okay to play with that game with and who not to. It's a lot of things. So you've got to find the local liaisons that have a better understanding of those things. You can't just show up in a country and be a restorer and put on a hard hat and a high-vis vest and start working. There are people there that don't want to see you succeed. That happens in America. If you're on a big job site and a whole crew shows up that's all from Japan, you're going to have some hesitations with them, and they're not going to work the way you do. They're going to work their way, and it's going to feel different. And those were interlocking systems that don't mesh well in large projects or models or things like that. It takes a lot of patience and understanding and working through it. So Oman was big. Worked in France it ended up only being 3 days. It was supposed to be a 2-week job. I don't like France. not my favorite thing. Paris, not my favorite place. The people there don't like Americans, in my experience. It was interesting. And then I would say and then later in life, I guess, one of the really cooler places that I went to work, which didn't have all the same complexities, but I went as a consultant. This was after I'd sold my restoration company as a contractor. And a few years later, I was hired by a contractor, a defense contractor, to come over and handle consulting work for a large-scale mold remediation job in Baghdad. So flew into Baghdad, which was an experience by itself on how they operate with infill and exfill into Baghdad. We had security, although Baghdad was under control. It was still had factions of weird stuff that would go on. It's just part of life there. It's not even a big deal. It's not a big deal to hear gunfire, AK-47, rat-a-tat-tat. But I was there 3 weeks, paid very, very well. Not as a hygienist or as a mold toxicologist or anything like that. They had that. But just they were not getting clearances on the workflow of how they were managing the remediation. This was a big facility that the U.S. had taken over for housing diplomats and non-military contractors and stuff like that. So it was a residential / commercial type community that had a lot of mold. And you're asking why mold? I don't even think I really know. I think it was just the air conditioning. They were trying to pump in so much air conditioning that the dew point had caused such incredible condensation inside that they were sweating the building out, and it ended up causing a lot of mold. So they weren't replacing their air with makeup air. They were just pumping in without expressing it out and getting a change of air. So that seemed to be what it was, but it didn't take long. It got bad. It was cool. I made a lot of money, really cool people, great experience. Certainly there's a lot of things there I can't talk about. Not that it was dangerous. I mean, to a certain level, of course, but just some NDAs that I signed, things that I might have seen. I didn't end up seeing anything, but they were prepared. I had to get security clearance for certain things. It was wild. Certain things I couldn't see. But working internationally, I'll relate it to this, is you've got to be prepared for what you're going to. I would say that's the same domestically. I can't tell you how many times I have gotten a call from someone that knows that I have a background in commercial disaster recovery, and especially in the coaching mentorship. And they really never have done anything to prepare to do that work. And then they get an opportunity. You're marketing to whatever your lead sources are. But one day a property management company calls up and said, "Hey, we Googled you. You've got great 5-star reviews, 4.9 with 150 people, you're way better than everybody else in the market. Our commercial building has flooded. Need your help. Well, all right. Sounds like great. Great. I get to go put all my equipment in. I've got, this is going to be a big payday. Well, you've kind of forgotten that you still have to run a regular day-to-day business too. You've got other jobs going on, the residential projects that you are getting from referral partners who call you all the time, not just this one time. So I see a lot of people go all in, but they're trying to use their plumber and their electrician that they use on the daily that's not prepared. Their HVAC cleaning company that cleans HVAC from homes is not the same as mechanicals that clean the larger ones. And I will tell you that's what CATx is going to be about, and that's what I like to coach about, is there's a sales and marketing side of it, but there's also just being ready when that phone call comes. And this is where I'll tie it into international. When you go over there, you don't have an opportunity to figure it out completely. You have to show up with a lot of knowledge and experience before you get invited to those parties. So I'll just jump back and forth to just, being ready now is what's your, I call it Rolodex because I'm old, right? Who do you have on your list for staffing? Not just one company, not just a local dude that's got a couple guys. You really need some restoration badasses, right? You need a source for management staffing, safety protocols. You're probably not ready for the safety side of a commercial, right? Some of you are. Some of you think you are. Even those that do commercial kind of regular have very weak safety procedures and structure. It is a much different ballgame. And believe it or not, sometimes the customers that hire you will have a better idea of what needs to happen because they watch their liability and they watch their workers' comp and their injuries are measured in the right way. How many people in this industry don't even have the required OSHA documentation to report their injuries? The law requires that you have that, has comp plan. So, but having the right people, where can you get more equipment? Do you have the right billing style? You're not going to do a big commercial job. You're not going to go to France and use Xactivate. It's T&M. That's universal. Everybody in the country, everybody in the world probably understands to some degree of what T&M looks like. It's just how many people you have, what do you charge, agreed upon rates in their currency, and that's where your T&M rate has to be converted to French or Japanese or whatever it is. So because someone has to still agree, even though you're going, you need a contract of what you're going to be paid for, the travel, all costs are going to be reimbursed, et cetera, et cetera. You got to build in trips home. You're going to build in experts you're going to bring in that you might bring into your team. I guess my point today is doing international work is in the way it's still just the same job. The work that we do is you're still going to clean using generally the same chemicals, unless there's a state or a country ban on what you're using. So that's another thing you have to know. Some of our chemicals they wanted us to use chemicals that they were approved for their version of EPA, not ours. They have much more stringent, a much higher level of regulation on what chemicals are used and people are exposed to. Their OSHA is different. It's not called OSHA. They have their own safety and health, life safety oversight and regulations. You've got to adapt to those. Same thing here. If you don't normally adhere to OSHA on jobs, you're going to have to. Commercial is much different. I love disasters, and I love the complexity. I love trying to figure things out. Even if you don't know how to do everything, the fact that you can figure it out and end up with a happy customer at the end, because they also don't know what you do or don't know. They aren't expecting you to be flawless. There's a quote that I just made a video for our social media this week that said, even when you're winning, you're not as good as you think you are. Even when you're losing, you're not as bad as you think you are. Marcus Aurelius was a very stoic Roman emperor and philosopher, and was known to, he's written books. Meditations is one of his books to read. Always seems to say the right thing. Like Socrates was his mentor, but he had a slave that worked for him, and the slave would always sit right directly behind him and lean in to Marcus Aurelius and whisper. You are just a man. You're just human. And would remind him everything you're trying to do, bigger than life type of things. You're trying to solve big problems, but give yourself the grace and the mercy to say you're just human. The same thing on these disaster projects, here or abroad. We think everyone's expecting 100%. That's the internal voice we have. It's not the truth. Do your best. Pay the best people. Pay them well. Put out the money to get the great results. Some jobs, you're going to have to spend a whole lot of money to get the right result. Some jobs you won't make a huge payday profit, but you will start a relationship that will create a new string of opportunities for you in the future. So it's a marketing investment. Overseas, we didn't have we had oversight from our billing, but not like in the way that we have it here in America with TPCs, third-party consultants, building engineers, building consultants like J.S. Held, Young and Associates and whatnot. We had some of them were federal government over there, oversight. There were some places we went that had, they didn't have a FTC. You charge a flat amount. You charge what they say you charge. Not everyone in the world has the liberties that we do have here, and we can't go into their world and project that. So it was always really interesting working abroad. Again, I loved it. It's an opportunity to meet new people, new opportunities in the future, people that are just like you. And I'm still friends with a lot of people that I've met on some of these journeys. But then you talk about your own team, how close you get when you're all somewhere like that, doing something together, then getting through something hard. You form a different bond. And that really, to me, in my career in restoration and disaster, has been probably what I hold on to the most are the relationships and the people and who I did it for and did it with. Again, the project's just a project. After a couple of days, it's just you're doing the same thing. You've got desiccant, you've got drying, you've got fueling for the generators, you've got cleaning crews, you've got milestones to hit every day. You're communicating the same way. It really becomes Groundhog Day. But the humanality of the teams that are working with you, going through stuff, you're there late nights, sitting in the hotel lobby or in your own hotel room or outside, crazy the traditions that some of these people have. Japan, those guys really wanted to take us out to karaoke bars. Karaoke is very, very popular in Japan, and they love Americans to do karaoke. They love for you to do Beatles and Elvis, and they think that's all you're going to sing. They love you to drink their sake. I don't love sake, but I had some. But it's just they want to take you out and show you their culture, which was really cool. Those are the things I hold on to. This is why I'm a coach and mentor. I connect people like this. I don't know that I'll ever be called to go to another country to look at something. I am going to France, to Paris again, but as a guest to see the Notre Dame Cathedral project behind the scenes. I've got an invite to go meet with the project management team there to do that. Just got to make it work. It's got to get it all together and do it. But all I'd say is I don't know that 98% of everyone watching, listening to our podcast is going to ever go overseas and do projects. I would say I never thought I would. So in my early career, as I was sitting and just dreaming of where I might go and what I might do, going to Japan, Fukashima was not one of them. Going to Australia was not one. Working at a Volkswagen plant and having 200 people look at us and me for the answers was not something that the younger myself ever expected. So don't rule it out. It's a bucket list thing maybe. But wherever you go, whatever you do, remember we're in the people business. We just do restoration. We got humans along and can build people up. The more you can build people up to do those things with you, the more in the future they can do them for you, and you can do bigger things. So that brings me up to what I want to talk about. You may not know this. I was reluctant to start advertising it, but we wrote a book, Restoration Advisors, myself and Jocelyn and our team. We have something called 41 Markers. It's been on our website for a while. 41 Markers are our navigational beacons. Markers are your beacons, and they're the things that we live by, our driving principles, our core principles. And it's on our website in a shorter form, 41 Markers down at the bottom. But a lot of people started reading our markers back to us or reaching out and saying that I liked some of the things that you've got on there. Not all that is important is urgent. And what we realize is that there's a deeper story to about why those are, and we run our business this way. So I wrote this book and said, this is how we operate our business and our lives, because our lives come first: family, spouses, brothers and sisters, parents. But the work we do is going to feed us to have a better life. So we've got to nurture it equally, in its own way. So I went deeper into each. Let me get the camera right. I went deeper into each of the markers. It's just a coffee table book. I don't know how many pages this is. 196 pages or something like that. Available. I'll put the link at the bottom. It's available on Amazon paperback. If you want a copy like this, it's available on Kindle. Soon to be Audible. I'll get that recorded. I'm trying to see if Morgan Freeman will do that for me. But listen, it's a great book. I believe in building a great, strong company starts with stating what you stand for and standing for what you state. It's what it is here. Check out the book. The last thing I would ask you, if you like this channel, if you like this thing, everybody listen. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of learning, a lot of education podcasts. They always say subscribe and like. If you would like to, that would be great. I'm not at all trying to monetize. We'll never get to the number that YouTube needs to make this a monetization, but I have a very, very good company that I love, and I think that we transform people's businesses and lives. And I would like to continue to get the word out that we exist and that we can help people. And if that means subscribing, gets the algorithms tuned up to where this goes to more people and more people find us that might need us. Not everyone needs a higher coach. Lots of people do. You'd be amazed how much you can do when you get outside of your own head. But having a mentor, having some outside eyes help guide you through turbulent waters can really, really, really make a big difference. So if you'd like to subscribe, I would appreciate it. I'm not, again, I don't have expectations. Way more people download this podcast than I ever thought was humanly possible. We're honored. We get better because of it. But if it reaches more people, it helps more people, which is at our core. But if you'd really like to support us in a couple different ways, the book is fine. You don't make a lot of money off of books. We're not doing the book, again, for money. We're trying to tell people who we are and that we exist and that you don't have to run your business by yourself. If you want to do commercial, you don't know where to start, I need you to reach out to us. I am starting CATx to help companies, even in your own market, start to capture some of that commercial work. Go to our website, to our blog. You can subscribe to our mailing list and kind of see a little bit of everything that we're into, get updates. Our podcasts are aired that way a little bit. Our blog, weekly newsletter blog articles come out. We put specials. But if you'd like to really support us, reach out to us about coaching. But I don't know when you're watching this, but if it's before June 18th of 2024, we're holding a business retreat only for businesses and owners and leadership of companies in Whitefish, Montana, near Glacier National Park. Beautiful place. In the summer is amazing. It's about 30 seats. Many of them are already full. I don't have the number right now. By the time you're watching this, it may be less or it may be full. But it's about 30 people. We like to hold small, intimate groups. This year's focus is about delegation. I think that delegation is one of the best strengths you can have, and that you should have a team full of people who are receiving responsibility from you, that you're getting rid of things and they aren't watching you steal their future. If you want more strength in delegation, check out the link below, see if it's still open. If we have some seats, we'd love to have you out in Montana with us. We'd be lifelong friendships and partnerships come from those type of environments. That's it for me. Next week, I'm going to start creeping into some really cool projects, okay? I've been talking about a few. This week was a little bit of an escape, talking about a bigger set of them in a group. But I just decided I wasn't going to do driving into each one of our commercial international jobs, because some of them, they weren't my stories to tell. They worked for other companies at that time. I worked for other companies. They weren't my disaster company was only national, U.S. based. But then I want to get into some of the bigger ones. So I eventually went back to finish up the BP oil spill, and I think that's where we'll start next week. And that's going to be 2 or 3. But that was a unique experience, probably the biggest and best of my life for a lot of reasons, but tough. That's it for me. Hit that subscribe button if you would like to help us let more people share it. If you like what you hear, it just takes a second. Let some other people know that we exist. I'm amazed at how many times I'm teaching somewhere on stage and people don't know we have a podcast. There's a lot of media out there. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of influence coming from a lot of different things. And sometimes just the algorithms just don't show people. So if you want to tell some of your friends and colleagues in your circles or in your franchise group that there is a podcast specifically for disasters, there's 3 seasons before this one, but this one specifically is about jobs. The others are interviews with some of the icons of the industry. Some of them are educational, talking about asbestos, talking about hiring the best players in your company. It's all good. Hopefully, it's all good. That's it for me. Thanks for watching Disaster Podcaster. If you have a great story to tell about a commercial job, don't rule out the idea that would you like to come and be a guest on one of my episodes this year. Probably end up doing about 24 episodes for this season. We're only on number 3. We have a lot left to go. I've scripted out a bunch of them, or at least outlined a few. But I could always plug in some real stories from real people and give you a chance to tell your story. That's it. See you next week.